Welcome to Parenting Different, a place where real adoption stories come to life. My name is Anna Bernacki, and this is the Parenting Different podcast. Welcome to the Parenting Different podcast. My name is Anna Bernacki, and today we have a really exciting guest with us. I am so excited to hear Abby's story and all about embryo adoption. So, hi, Abby. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are today. You are also a podcaster, which I love. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks, Anna. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be on the other side of a podcast like this. It's really fun. We actually met, Anna and I met through an interview that we did on our podcast with Anna, and I guess kind of met through Instagram, but then got to talk more through the podcast. So it's fun to be on this side. But anyways, I am a mom of 3, and I am mom because of adoption. So embryo adoption and domestic infant adoption, which I know we'll focus more on the embryo adoption today. But yeah, I'm a mom of 3, and just, there was a time in my life that I didn't know if I'd ever have that title of mom. So super thankful to be where I'm at. So my son is 4 and we have 9-month-old twins, 9 months actually today. So
they're
we're busy.
So cute too. They're the cutest.
They are. They're so cute.
Tell me a little bit about, you did embryo adoption first.
Mm-hmm.
What led you down that path? And I think that is so fascinating.
Yep.
And I'd heard about it a little bit before I met you. And then since meeting you, I've heard about it a ton. So I don't know if it's just like...
It's in your algorithm now.
Right. Is it in my algorithm, or is it like actually becoming bigger and more popular? Which I think it's a little bit of both, maybe. Sure. But I am so fascinated by that. And I would love to hear your journey to discovering embryo adoption and that whole process and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, definitely. So my husband and I, we'd been married for a few years, and, we said, okay, we feel like we're ready to start a family. We both really wanted to get our master's degrees. So we were kind of like working on school, in our careers, all that. And then we're like, okay, time to start thinking about what's this going to look like, building a family. So, we kind of just... we're trying, we're waiting, nothing's really happening. I was working at the time on a marketing team of all women who were having babies left and right, and feeling like, okay, I know it's only been a few months, but I feel like this should be working for us. Our families, our parents had never had any infertility issues. We didn't have that in our playbook at all. We just didn't know what infertility really looked like from our family side.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we, through my boss, actually at the time, she connected me with her fertility specialist. And so went, kind of had a consultation, went the route of exploratory, what's going on? Can I get a diagnosis? What's happening? And it just, everything kept coming up, everything looks fine. There's no reason, unexplained, all of this. So, we walked that hard road, and just that really, lonely, painful, awful road of infertility for a few years. It was probably, I'd say, about 3.5 years before we started really thinking okay, we've kind of hit our limit of what we want to do fertility clinic wise. And I'm happy to talk about that. It's not a big deal at all to me to share personal conviction of that at all. But we had chosen to not go the IVF route for a variety of reasons, which again, I'm super open about it, but I'll kind of keep it moving for the sake of the conversation today. But yeah, we had a friend who had done embryo adoption through a private match. She had met friend of a friend who had remaining embryos from doing IVF, and we watched that friend build her family and them, that couple build their family through embryo adoption. And we're like, that's pretty cool. This is really neat. Yeah. She was able to carry a child. Like, that's wild. And then we had another friend who went through the NEDC, which is the National Embryo Donation Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. So she went there, and she and her husband walked through embryo adoption there, and we're like, okay, it kind of like keeps coming up. Like, what is this? We need to look into it. So in the beautiful timing of March of 2020, we decide to start this embryo adoption journey, and we're like, what are we doing? This is wild. So the way we started was just working with an agency. So I just literally Googled, how do I adopt embryos? Like, what does that even look like? And I had friends who had done it a couple different ways, but I was just, doing my due diligence of research. And I found Nightlight Adoptions, and they had a program called Snowflakes. And so I was like, okay, interesting. So I'm telling my husband about it. We're doing our research, kind of looking at like their timeline and things. And we're like, okay, this is interesting. And at the time, the fertility clinic that I was working with, they had a little sticker like on their window when you walked in that said like it was like snowflake partner or something like that. And I was like, huh, okay. I'm like starting to see this pop up in different places. So
Interesting.
I talk to my fertility specialist, and she's like, oh yeah, we have women come through often who work with this adoption agency. They adopt embryos, and we do the transfers right here. And it was literally like 10-15 minutes from my house. Whereas some
Wow.
people travel across the country very
Yes.
far to go and do these transfers. So, all these things just start lining up. So we start the process. We're assigned like a caseworker. Basically, we share our preferences with them. We go through like not necessarily a traditional home study, but pretty similar. They call it like a snowflake evaluation, or there's probably a more specific name for it, but it's something like that, where it's in essence it's a home study. But they're
Sure.
just doing psychological evaluations. Obviously you have to have a letter of recommendation from a doctor, some different things. Like, they have to make sure you're in good standing before you start this process. So we started all of that, and in November of 2020 we were matched with 4 embryos. So we were like, okay, how is, like, what is this going to look like? We really didn't know. We were told. So my husband, I'm Caucasian, my husband is Hispanic, and so we had said like it'd be amazing if we could find Hispanic Caucasian embryos. Like, how cool would that be? They could like kind of
Yeah.
look like us. And so we just put that down, but we weren't like only this. There was no, we didn't really have parameters like that. Um, and they had told us, the majority of people who do IVF are Caucasian or Asian. So that's likely what you see when you look at like,
Interesting.
yeah, when you look at like this kind of, pool of embryos. And so I never in 1 million years would I have thought that we would get our first match that we were given to review was Guatemalan and Swedish. And so we were like,
Wow.
this is really wild. So that's how we kind of started the process. And I'll let you ask some more questions, and I can go into more detail of what happened after that.
So I'm just curious so were these embryos that were donated, were they ones that had kind of been abandoned? Were like, is there some in between? I'm just so curious because I know there's a
Yeah.
while or like a wide range of it too, because so many embryos are made. So
Hmm.
how do they determine? I mean, I know there's testing that goes into all these embryos, so and then higher quality ones how does all of that impact what your decisions are on your end
Yeah.
then?
Yeah, that's a great question, because just like in a more typical adoption, you have your communication preferences that you even choose of, do I want this
Oh,
to
wow,
be
yeah.
like a fully open adoption, a semi-open, or a completely, anonymous closed. So there are people who will surrender their embryos to either Nightlight or the NEDC, or honestly, even like some of your local fertility clinics have a like have a list, and they will say, if you want to donate your embryos to another family. So there's a lot of different
Oh,
ways you can go about it. The family that we call them Judah's genetic family. So his genetic family, they actually wanted a fully open relationship. So
okay.
they had donated their embryos, but they wanted to be a part of matching and communicating and everything. And honestly, at the time, we didn't know a ton about adoption, and we didn't know all that was going to take place. We'd like obviously done some research and heard stories of sometimes the adoptive family of the embryos becomes almost like cousins to, their genetic siblings, and, some different things like that. And we were kind of evaluating that. We're like, we just don't know who it will be. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
like we just really had no idea how it was going to go. So we chose to have a semi open relationship in communication wise. So the way it worked is like we reviewed their file, they reviewed our file, almost like you're reviewing, like profile books when if you're
Yeah.
familiar with that. So, you're
Yeah.
reviewing the profile books, and then you choose, yes, I'm like I want to move forward with this, and you both decide that on, both the donating side and the accepting side. Um, and then the semi open communication comes in where we will send annual updates now to Judah's genetic family. And then they send us usually like a Christmas card or something, but we don't necessarily have direct communication right now.
Okay.
But that's something that we said we are open to evaluating, as time
Yeah.
goes on. So that's kind of how that all worked. But it is funny. I have a friend who, like they went through the NEDC, and they thought that they were choosing from like the anonymous pile, like of embryos, like the anonymous bank of embryos. And it turned out like they actually did end up like figuring out who the people were because they thought they were in the anonymous pile, but then they weren't. So there's like all these different ways of,
Yeah.
just yeah, there's all these different ways of finding the right match, and depending on what your preferences are.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So then you're matched.
Yep.
What happens next? Like, because it's so different. You're not going to the hospital
Nope.
to pick up a baby. Like, it's so different. So what
Yeah.
happens next?
Yeah, it is. It is really different. So, once the match happens, then you kind of start this like logistical roller coaster of working with the agency to get the embryos that you've been matched with sent to the clinic that you're going to work with, them accepting those embryos, making sure they have enough storage space and all of that. And then also, because you're actually doing a physical transfer, like I'm transferring this embryo to my body has to go through a couple months of
Yeah,
preparation.
I'm sure.
So there's a whole wild roller coaster with all of that, but it's like all of these things, lined up to the day. So we were, just to give an idea, we were matched in November. At the end of December, I actually think it was like Christmas Eve. It was either Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. We had to like go in the back door to the clinic because I had to get a specific shot on that day that it almost like puts you into menopause as a woman. So it depletes all your hormones to basically like a baseline, because what the doctors want to be able to do is to get your estrogen and progesterone to the perfect level to be able to receive that embryo. And so you go like, and there's different ways obviously of doing this, but for me, I chose to get like one specific shot, go in. And so I'm like hot flashes, mood swings.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, the whole deal for like 2 weeks. And
oh
then
no.
you start on, there's oral medication, and then there's shots. So like actual large needle injections, that some women, I have friends who do this, have done it on their own. Like they give themselves their shots. And I was like, absolutely not. I cannot do that. So my husband, Josh, you're going to learn to be a nurse. So every night at 8 o'clock, he had to give me a shot in like my upper butt, basically, like
Oh,
lower back, upper butt. So yeah, so you start this whole thing and you're just getting your body prepared and ready to transfer the embryo, which is wild.
wow.
Yeah.
That is wild. So basically, you're going through the IVF
Yep.
procedures in a way. It's just, or like at least a portion of it.
Yeah, it's called a frozen embryo transfer. You'll see the acronym FET listed on like
Okay.
different medical forms and things. So, yeah, like in a typical IVF setting, you would go have your eggs harvested, there would be sperm harvested, and then like the doctors and the embryologists, they put it all together and they wait to let it grow. Then you would, schedule your frozen embryo transfer. So, by doing the embryo adoption, you're skipping that whole first
Right.
part because the embryo is already intact, which I do think that's like kind of a misconception that happens a lot where a lot of people would think like, oh, like you're just like getting your eggs donated or like you're just receiving a donation of eggs. Like no, an embryo is like
No.
it's all together.
Yeah.
They've already like let it start growing before they put it on ice basically. They cryo freeze it. So
Right.
yeah, that's a big misconception because I do think some people think that like, oh, maybe you just got eggs donated, then you used your husband's sperm, and then you create like, no, it's already together.
Yeah. So, how did you, walking into this, how did you feel knowing that you would be carrying a child not genetically yours? Was that strange? Did it feel natural to you? Like how did you feel about that?
I was so thrilled to be a mom and for I felt so hopeful that this was what God was going to use to build our family that that didn't even honestly really crossed my mind. Like, yes, there's the unknowns of, will there be like developmental delays? Will there be
Yeah,
health issues? Like, I know my health history. I know my family's health history. I don't know this embryo's health history we know to a point, but like all the
right.
ins and
It's not the
outs.
same. Yeah,
Um, just like in a traditional like in a whether it's foster or foster care or adoption, like you get a little picture but
yeah.
you don't know the full lineage of all the different things. So there's certainly the fear of the unknowns like that, but it certainly didn't keep me from thinking like, oh, I won't bond with this baby or anything like that. Like I was very confident and very hopeful.
So how did the process go? You are now, did they just implant one embryo? Did they go for multiples? How did
Okay,
you had four,
so
right?
we adopted four,
Okay.
and the plan was to transfer one. And we knew that they were frozen in they call them straws that they freeze them in, like literally like a you think of a straw. So they freeze them in straws of two. So our plan was to transfer one and to refreeze that second one that was in that straw, and then we would come back for subsequent transfers. And so this is still in the time of like you can't bring guests in with you to the doctor's
Mm.
offices and hospitals and you're masked and you're gloved and all the things. And so I go in by myself to my transfer
That's
and
so
it
hard.
is like snowing like crazy. Like we barely could even make it to the parking garage. Like we're sliding on the road. Like, anything that could be against
Oh
us is against us.
no.
And so my husband is literally waiting in the car for me. He cannot even come in the building.
Oh
So
wow.
I get in there and this is like so much information. So, but like anyone who ever goes through this, you will understand, or if you know someone, you have to have a very full bladder in order for this procedure to work. So they tell you to like chug water all day and not go to the bathroom. And so I'm in
That
there.
sounds horrible.
It's terrible. So I'm in there and I'm on the basically an operating table. I mean, they try to make it like calm and serene and have like nice music, and but you're like, I'm on an operating
You
table.
can't fool me.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm there and I'm like, I have my phone out because I'm videoing because they set up a screen and you can watch the embryo like actually as it goes in. So I got my phone out to video, and the embryologist comes in and she says, okay, so we thawed two. One is pretty good quality, and she gave the grade. One is like a subpar quality, so we either need to discard it or transfer it, but we cannot refreeze it. And I was like, wait, wait, wait. The plan was only one.
Oh
So
no.
so now I'm on the phone with my husband who's in the car on speakerphone, and I'm like, "Hey babe, so we have to transfer too." And he's like, "What?" And so I'm like trying to explain it, and I'm like all this while like I have to go to the bathroom so bad. Like I'm like in
Oh
pain, and
no.
it's like taking longer because now we have to
Right.
make this decision. So, anyways, all that to say, we ended up transferring two embryos because we discarding one was not an option for us. And so
Yeah.
that's what we did. And I had thought in that split second, I had thought back about something that one of my counselors had told me because again, infertility time I was in a hard dark place and was in
Yeah.
some pretty intense counseling. And, she had told me, she said, even if this transfer is not successful, even if this is not what happens, you're giving these embryos a dignified way to die. And I was like, holy moly.
Wow.
Like, if you really think about it and if you believe that life begins at the embryo stage, they're just frozen. Like they're just kind of in this limbo space. And so, anyways,
Yeah.
in that split second, I was like, okay, even if only one of these sticks, I I gave the other one a chance. Like that was really,
Right.
and my husband, like he knew that too, and like we had talked about that, so it wasn't a hard decision, but it was still like this really wild time on this
Right. In
operating
the
table.
moment, on the fly. Yes.
so so yeah, so we transferred the two, and then the doctor's like, okay, you could go to the bathroom and then you know come back in 9 days and we'll do blood work. And I'm like, okay. So went home. I There's like a kind of like an old wives tale. It's like more in the IVF community where you should eat a large McDonald's French fry when you leave your appointment. It's like the salt and the fat and everything like just helps that little embryo nestle. And I was like, I love French fries, so
Whatever it
sure.
takes. Yeah.
So we went and picked up our French fries, went home, and I took a few days off of work just to try to rest. I had like a heating pad to stay warm, and, like, just all these things that you're like, that I'd read, or that like I don't even know if there's like scientific proof. Some people will say just go back to work the next day, no big deal. But I was like being cautious. So
Yeah.
all of
I
the
probably would have
warm,
done that way
yeah,
too.
so like warm broths and soups and just different things, and lots of Netflix binging and painting my nails and just sitting on the couch with my dog, for a few days. So that's what I did. And then I took a pregnancy test. A, so I took a pregnancy test the day before I was supposed to go get blood work because I just couldn't wait. And
Understandable.
yeah, and it was positive, and I was just so immensely thrilled. I mean, from seeing negative, negative, negative for a very long time to see a positive was life changing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. And then now when did you discover that only one had stuck?
Yeah, so you go in like and I'm sure different clinics and things do it differently, but what my doctor wanted to do was come back for blood work every couple of days because you want to make sure that your HSG levels are rising. And so when you first go, like depending on what the first number doesn't really matter. I want to say mine was like 200, 300, somewhere around there. If it starts to like more than double over the next couple of days, there's a chance that you have multiples.
Okay.
And so like when I saw 300, I was like, oh, that's really high. Like there could be two. Like this is crazy. And they're like, no, 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 just wait. So it would steadily go up like 100 or so each time I went. And then you do that for maybe a week or so. And then I ended up, going in for a pretty early ultrasound. I was like maybe 6 weeks along. So, like a month after transfer, I'd hit an ultrasound and they're able to see one heartbeat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you knew very early that it was just one. Was
Yeah.
there disappointment or relief or
Yeah.
just
So I
'cause I
know
hear that is confusing and conflicting.
it really is. And like, there's so many parts of our life and through this story that I have had to hold joy and sorrow in the
Mm,
same hand,
yeah.
like not even in two separate hands, like truly in the same breath, like having joy and sorrow. And we had some other things going on at the time and things with other friends and just all these things that like I just was so grateful that there was one that had stuck that I didn't even
Yeah.
really think about the second. I didn't really even mourn the second. Um, Fast forward, it was I'll share about my second transfer too if you want, but it wasn't until much later that I kind of like really mourned the fact that like yeah, there were four at one point.
Mm,
And now my son, like I would have loved for him to get to see that brother or sister or multiple,
yeah,
at some point. And he doesn't see that in our home. So that's definitely, there's a sadness there.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went on to have your son,
Yep.
and how has that how have you talked about that adoption? Because I think it's so like when there's an after birth adoption, right? It's easy. I feel like it's easier to talk about.
Hmm.
Um, well, at least maybe just because that's all I've ever known. It's easier to talk about. I don't know. But how do you navigate those conversations? Because I know you're very open and honest with him. How have you navigated those conversations with him?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that is hard when you're not to the point of explaining the science of it all to know,
Right.
to like
Yeah.
really tell him like how did you come to be? And so our agency did a great job in preparing us for a lot of different things. Like, even if maybe, on our podcast that my friend Laura and I do, we talk a lot about like the things that the home study did not prepare you for. But, there's a lot of what the agency had us read and, talk about and discuss and things that was really helpful. And one of the things they said was start telling your child their story when they can't even understand it, because it
Yeah.
helps you form the words that you want to say. It helps you start to get comfortable with like, what do we call his genetic parents, like what words are we using? And so anyways, from the time he was basically 2 days old, we're talking to him and telling him like there, and my husband was the one who kind of coined the phrase. He's like, some kids are adopted when they're teenagers, some are adopted when they're toddlers, some are adopted when they're embryos, and you were adopted as an embryo. So kind of like just walking him back all the way
Yeah.
to like, you were adopted at the very beginning, and that's not the case for all. Like now we tell him, your sisters
Right.
were adopted when they were right when they were born. And so, yeah, there's some different ways that we've kind of gone about sharing that. And over time, I mean, as he understands more of like where babies come from and all the different things, like we'll definitely be able to
For sure.
share
Yeah.
more. But we actually like we have pictures of his we say like genetic father and genetic mother. We have pictures of them. We have pictures of even his genetic mother grew up in Sweden. And we have,
Oh,
these pictures of her like on this Swedish farm and like just really sweet things that we have that like my hope is that I will print all of it out, like kind of make a little book of his, where he came from,
That's really
and be
neat.
able to share that with him over time. And so he's 4 now, so we're getting closer, I think, to being able to talk more about that. And having 2 sisters who are also adopted, I think will really help, because we'll be able to talk about, like, there is a difference, but there also is a similarity of,
Right.
here's your story and here's what we know.
Right. I think so often when you have a traditional adoption, you're looking at it going, okay, you grew in this mother's tummy and now you live with us. But wait, you grew in, like, how do you explain that's it's different.
I
And I
know.
love that your agency did prepare you, because how often do
Mhm.
we hear that agencies gave no training, no information, no help, and just kind of threw you into it?
Yeah.
So that's amazing that they did prepare you for that, because it is something that is so unique.
Yeah.
And hopefully over time will become more consistent and maybe more popular, but it's not, I would guess it's not a huge community of people who have adopted embryos versus traditional infant adoption.
No, definitely not. And I'm not sure what the NEDC's numbers are as of recent, but Nightlight, they have kept track of, every baby that's been born through the Snowflake program. And Judah was around like 860 something. And now they're up to like maybe 13, 1400, something like that. So, there's been lots of babies born, but when you still look at that number, you're like,
It's
1,300
very
out of
small in comparison.
it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. But, we're so grateful for knowing that we have friends who have walked this road too, and that we know that, one day down the road, if Judah wants to connect with someone or talk to someone, he can easily reach out to our friends, Ellis and Addie and, Molly. Like, they have walked this road too, and they may have come at it from different ways, and, like,
Sure.
their parents may have described things differently, but, like, ultimately we know that he will have a few people that we already know of that he can
Yeah, that's
talk
amazing.
to.
That's
Yeah.
huge. So then you mentioned that you did a second transfer
Yep.
after that.
Yeah, so when Judah was almost 2, we said, okay, let's think about, we have 2 remaining embryos. We would like to just transfer them together because we really only want to do this one more time. The whole process of being pregnant and giving birth was really wonderful and very redemptive for me. I loved
Yeah,
it and was really thankful. But all of the hormones and all of the things just were not the best on my body, and were just really, really taxing. And I needed to have an additional surgery to prepare for another transfer. So there were just a lot of different things that were kind of going against it. And I was like, let's just do this one more time. So we went back to our doctor. We said, ideally, we'd like to do another transfer within the next 6 months. What does that look like? So we started the process again. Um, and I didn't even say this at the beginning of, like, kind of where it went with the timeline, but after our transfer with Judah, we had the 2 remaining embryos, and our clinic had sent us a notice saying, your storage time is expiring. What do you want to do with your remaining embryos? Because they only do like a short term, 6 month storage.
oh, yeah.
And so we are like, well, we're not going to be ready to transfer them in 6 months. So we had to, like,
Give us a minute.
yeah, exactly. So we had to, like, go through this whole, legal process to send the embryos to a long-term storage facility in another state. And you pay a fee, of course, for every month that they're there. Like, so you're making these decisions at the
Yeah,
beginning of, like, what, I don't even, where am I going to be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Like,
right.
I
Yeah,
don't know. So, even in that, I was so thankful to have a couple friends to reach out to and just be like, no one else knows what to do with this. Like, I don't even, this feels so weird. And also, like, I'm like signing these like legal waivers that, like, if something happens to the, like, all these things, I just felt in those moments, there were so many times that I was like, no one else has to do this. Why do I have to do this? And, kind of getting
Yeah.
like angry about that, but also knowing, okay, I'm not alone. There are other people who have walked this road. Like, take a deep breath and sign the paper, like just that kind of thing. But anyways, so we scheduled the second transfer for September of 2023, and everything was looking great. Like, I had like notes on my phone of what I had done for my protocol, so called, like all my wives little old wives tales, all the different things. Like, I had all of that. I was like, I'm following this to a T. I'm going to eat my pineapple and my pomegranate seeds and drink my brown, whatever, all the stuff. And not trying to like will it to be and like manifest it, but also just saying like, it worked before, so of course it will work again. Like, zero doubt. And
Right.
yeah,
Right. You
like,
had no reason to doubt.
why would you doubt? And my doctor had said, okay, I will transfer too because you're a good candidate. Like, I know that you can handle a pregnancy, but you have a very high likelihood of both sticking. You have a very high likelihood of having twins. And I have always wanted twins. Like, I've always thought that that would be so fun, like chaos and wild, which I know is crazy. Um, but I always just thought twins would be so fun for whatever reason. And so when she's telling me this, I'm like, oh, yes, okay, this is going to be great. This is going to be so cool, whatever. So, my mom comes and she's watching my son. We go for the procedure. I do the whole like lay on the couch, have some kind of bed rest time, everything. And I just felt like I wasn't pregnant. Like, I just had this feeling and I was like,
Weird.
I don't want that to be true. So I'm like trying to not think about it. But I don't know if it was just like I was distracted with my son or like, I don't know. I don't know what it was. But I, did the whole thing. I'm like, I'm going to take my pregnancy test the day before I go for my blood work. And it was negative. And it was like, okay, maybe it's negative today. I'm going to go do the blood work, just let it all play out the way it's supposed to. They'll tell me something different. They're like still like trying to be hopeful, but
Right.
inside knowing like I just I don't know, something feels different.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I, went in the morning for blood work and then waited a very long time for my doctor to call me back, like on pins and needles, just waiting. And she's like, "You already know, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I already know." And she said, "I am so sorry. There's nothing that I can look at in any of your history and any of the way that the transfer went. Nothing that indicates anything other than just genetic abnormality. Like, we just don't know. We can't explain it." And so that was hard to hear too. I wanted like a definitive reason
Yeah.
why this happened. But of course, we don't often get those in our lives. And
Right.
so, yeah, so after that, my husband and I just were like, okay, like maybe this is what we're meant to have Judah. We're meant to have an only child. We're not going to do an embryo transfer again. Like, we really put that, pretty far off the table. Even though my clinic did say, you can join basically a wait list, so that when other families get that paperwork and it says, what do you want to do with your remaining embryos? Some people will say, we want to give those to another family for adoption. And so I knew that that was a possibility, but I just didn't feel like that would be the route that we would go. And so, yeah, we just like took a few months of really not even talking about it and just kind of
Yeah.
mourning the loss. And yeah, was really sad, really, really sad.
I'm sure.
Um, so a few months of that. And then we decided on domestic infant adoption after that because yeah, my husband and I came separately to the table with the idea of like our family is not complete yet.
Mm.
And so that's kind of how we got there. And I like to look back at different dates and like see, I think dates can tell us a really cool story.
Yeah.
And so we had started the process for our domestic adoption um, in February of that next year, so February of 2024. And one day shy of the 1 year anniversary of the failed transfer was when we got the call for our twins.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have to ask though, did you request to adopt twins or did it just happen
No,
that you were just meant to have twins?
it just happened. Honestly, it just happened.
Wow.
I want to say on our paperwork, you can choose like, are you open to multiples, I think,
Sure. Yeah.
or are you open to siblings, things like that. And we're like, yeah, we're totally open to that. We see ourselves with more kids. So yeah, we're open to it. But yeah, when we got the way that the agency worked with the domestic adoption is you would get an email that would have like a little blurb about, the birth mom, how far along she was, where she was located, estimated adoption fees, like just little bits of information. And when this email came through and it said twins, I was like, okay, interesting. And so, yeah. So we knew like at that point when we put our names in and like, put our profile book before the attorney who took it to their birth mom, we knew that she was expecting twins at that point, which was, yeah, a whole wild, crazy road.
That is.
Yeah.
And it's so neat to see, like you said, those dates. And not
Hmm.
only was it right at that year mark, but it was twins. I think
I
that is
know.
so beautiful. Like
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
So you got
It
your
really
twins
is.
after all.
Yep, exactly. I know. And I have one of my friends, she's like, back in college, you used to talk about having twins all the time. And truly, I do not remember that. Like, I don't, where did my infatuation with twins come from? I don't know. But she said that I talked about it in college. So really, this has been brewing for a while.
Wow, that's so fun.
Yeah.
So now they are 9 months old. Judah is 4, and you have this beautiful family created through multiple avenues of adoption.
Yeah.
I think that is so cool. What would you say to families who are going through infertility? They are starting to look at the different types of adoption. What would, as they're going through that process of exploring, where do we go from here? What would your advice be to them?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I would just say, like, I see you and you're not alone. It's a really, really hard, lonely road.
Yeah.
But it's not a road that you have to walk alone. You're not solo on it. Um, and then I would say if you have any desire to, have a pregnancy and give birth, if that is anywhere in your desires, which it probably in some cases is. I'm sure some cases it isn't too, but I would say pursue embryo adoption and just see if it's right for you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ins and outs of like, are you, physically capable of, carrying a child? And there's a lot of different tests. And of course, I mentioned like all the hormones. Like, it's not something that's just like, oh, just walk in and transfer a baby into me. Like there's a lot to it. So it's not for everyone, but I would say it's probably for more people to explore than have explored.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's probably, I mean, we always talk about wait lists and long waiting time. You're probably not talking about a long waiting time with
No.
embryo adoption because there are so many embryos available.
Yeah, and I mean, I've even heard stories of people who, they'll start doing some fundraising because there's still a cost to it. Like you
Sure.
you may choose to, take out a loan or to pay for it on your own or whatever that might look like, but I still encourage people to fundraise at least a small amount because it's a good way to get your story out there and to share more.
Sure.
And so like we have a friend who she, made a Facebook page and said like, this is our adoption journey. This is what we're planning to do. And through that page, her, a friend of a friend of a friend said, I have remaining embryos. Can I donate them to you? So they didn't even have to
Wow.
go like the agency route, which, there's still definitely benefit in that, of course, but if you have a great doctor that you've worked with or that and you have someone who's willing to donate embryos to you directly,
Yeah.
you could be looking at like a few months timing. Like it's really
Right.
wild. It could go fast.
Yeah. So, out of curiosity, I mean, obviously, don't give me specific numbers, but
Yeah.
cost-wise, is in comparing to traditional infant adoption, what is it comparable? Is it more, less? What would you say it
Yeah.
is
So
cost-wise?
um when we started the process, so this was 2020, well, 2020 we started it. I think it was around, I'd say around 10,000 or so for the fees to the agency for the embryo adoption. Now, so I don't know exactly what it would be today. I'm guessing it's more than that just because everything is more than that right now.
Everything is? Yeah.
um, but I will say where it starts to get a little bit different is who your provider is, from everything from your health insurance, if you have health insurance, and what that covers.
Right,
Um,
because some cover so much more than others.
yeah,
Yeah.
I had a friend who, I think I walked into the clinic and I paid, for round numbers, I paid 5,000 total because my insurance did not cover anything IVF related. And she paid 500 because hers did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot to look into when it comes to like looking at
Sure.
total numbers. But I actually think more and more insurances are starting to cover like some of the hormone drugs and different things like
I've
that
heard
now.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely like a lot of options like that. Um, and yeah, there's just like so many different ways to go about it. And I think like what state you live in and where your clinic
Mhm.
is and what they charge for the different, every appointment costs so much and all of that. So I think it can vary a lot. I do think ultimately it's probably still less than a typical infant domestic adoption because of
Sure.
like, well, the big part of it probably is your legal fees look so different because an embryo adoption is actually a transfer of goods. Like, literally, it's the same paperwork as like I'm transferring my car to you or my
Wow.
whatever.
That's
Um,
so weird to think
it's
about.
it is. So while I obviously don't agree with it in one sense, on the
Right.
legal fee side, it's actually really helpful because you don't need like an adoption attorney or anyone with any like specialties or anything to handle the legal paperwork for you. So
Wow.
there's like give and take on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with any type of adoption, you're looking at the cost is going to come in somewhere, right?
Yes.
Like whether it's going through the physical, even your losses and
Hmm.
your like there still is a physical commitment that you're making and cost to it.
Absolutely.
When you're adopting through foster care, there's the emotional roller coaster. And
Hmm.
so maybe you don't have the same legal fees, but you're paying for it in other ways. And
Absolutely.
so, I mean, every single type of adoption, I think at the end of the day, it balances out to about the same
Yeah.
because you're one way or another, you're paying.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I think this is so fascinating. I have
Yeah,
loved learning about the process, and I hope that more people will look into embryo adoption because I think it is such an incredible option for so many people. So, thank you.
it really is. Thanks so much for having me. And I am truly an open book. So if anyone has, broad questions or nitty gritty questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you.